We're lighter, we're faster, and if that don't work, we're nastier. Ford v Ferrari is directed by James Mangold and is starring Matt Damon, Christian Bale, Jon Bernthal, Caitriona Balfe, Josh Lucas, and Tracy Letts. Before I go any further, I just want to say there will not be any plot spoilers in this review. This is based on the true story of Carroll Shelby, who was a famous car designer, as well as race car driver Ken Miles, who had to deal with working along with the Ford Motor Company in a rather contentious way to create a car that could compete with Ferrari at the 24-hour of Le Mans car race. And this film chronicles all of the ups and downs and trials and tribulations that they all had to go through. Director James Mangold has a rather eclectic filmography. He has done everything from westerns to biopics to a couple of superhero movies, and now he's here with a kind of quasi-biopic based on a true story film that deals around the world of auto racing. And it deals about auto racing specifically in the 1960s. But what I really like about this film is that it's about personal achievement. It's about a really personal goal of trying to overcome a monumental odds in order to achieve something that is kind of bigger than yourself, and it's something that is kind of more existential than I think that is actually tangible. And there's a lot of existential things happening in this film when it comes to Carroll Shelby, who has to deal with transitioning from being a race car driver to being a race car designer and to being a rather in-demand race car designer, and also Ken Miles, who is someone who is an older race car driver, but he is just an absolute genius when it comes to race cars. When it comes to building and designing cars, he just has a knack for it. And you see the way both of these guys are able to mesh with one another in order to try to accomplish something, to go from basically nothing to being able to achieve the most in terms of competing with Ferrari, who at the time was an absolute juggernaut in the race world. They weren't an absolute juggernaut when it came to actually selling cars. The Ford Motor Company at that time, and even today to a certain extent, is a gigantic automobile company. And what is interesting is that how that doesn't really factor into this film too much when it comes to the ability to create a car. It comes down to human ability. When it comes to the film aspects of this film, James Mangold directs the heck out of this film from a technical standpoint. The audio mix in this film is just incredible. The sound design, the editing, when it comes to the sound, is just impeccable. You can hear the engines rev, you can hear the zooming of the cars going by. It's just absolutely fantastic, the power you feel with the engines roaring in this film. And also, when it comes to directing those scenes, I think James Mangold is absolutely fantastic. He knows how to have all of these scenes cut together in such a way where we understand what's going on, and the pacing of it is absolutely fantastic. The pacing of this film, I think, is absolutely fantastic to a point, and I'll get to that a little bit later when I get into my negatives. But Matt Damon is absolutely fantastic in this film as Carroll Shelby, as someone who has to deal with both the corporate side of things as well as the personal side of things. And also you have Ken Miles, who is exquisitely portrayed by Christian Bale. Christian Bale once again shows us that he is one of the best working actors today. He is a rather chameleon when it comes to all of these roles, and he is astonishing in this film. And you just see him disappear into this character of Ken Miles, or this person as Ken Miles. There's a really interesting familial dynamic that I really like about this film. I really wish they kind of portrayed more of the dynamic between Ken Miles and his wife. That was a real strength in this film, and it kind of faded away as the film went on, and I really wanted to see them come back to it a few more times. But when we get into the negatives I have in this film, there aren't too many of them. The biggest one for me is the film, when it gets towards the end, shows its length. There's an extra few minutes at the end of this film that's a bit of an epilogue that I feel just really keeps dragging the film out and out, and I really wished it had been cut a little bit more, because that's when I really felt the length of this film play in. With all that being said, I'm going to give this film a 4 out of 5 stars. The acting's fantastic, the direction's fantastic, the sound is amazing, the editing keeps this film moving at a really good pace despite its length and despite its late film slow pacing that really kind of drags out a little bit too far. I think the pacing gets you up to that point very, very well. I do highly recommend this film, not only if you're a fan of James Mangold, but if you're just a fan of really solid filmmaking and a really solid and interesting story.